you get to the 1790s, Madison was bitterly condemning the deterioration of the system he'd created, with stock jobbers and other speculators taking over, destroying the system in the name of their own interests, and so on. Aristocrats and Democrats. There was another picture, in words at least, and partly in belief, expressed by Jefferson, the leading Democratic theorist. Not so much in his own actions, but in his talk about them, in which he made a distinction between what he called the aristocrats and the Democrats. He put it pretty eloquently. Basically, the idea of the aristocrats is that power has to be vested in a special class of particularly distinguished and privileged people who will make the decisions and do the right thing. The Democrats believe that power should be in the hands of the population. Ultimately, they are the repository of decision-making and also, ultimately, of sensible action. But whether we like their decisions or not, that's what we should be supporting. He was supporting the Democrats, not the aristocrats. That's kind of the opposite of the Madisonian view, though. As I said, it didn't take long for Madison to see where the system was going, and that schism runs right through American history to the present moment. Reduce inequality. It's of some interest that this debate has a hoary tradition. It goes back to the first work on political democracy in classical Greece. The first major book on political systems is Aristotle's Politics, a long study that investigates many different kinds of political systems. He concludes that of all of them, the best is democracy. But then he points out exactly the flaw that Madison pointed out. He wasn't thinking of a country, he was thinking of the city-state of Athens. And remember, his democracy was for free men. But the same was true for Madison. It was free men, no women, and of course not slaves. Aristotle observed the same thing that Madison did much later. If Athens were a democracy for free men, the poor would get together and take away the property of the rich. Well, same dilemma, but they had opposite solutions. Madison's solution was to reduce democracy, that is, to organize the system so that power would be in the hands of the wealthy, and to fragment the population in many ways so that they couldn't get together to organize to take away the power of the rich. Aristotle's solution was the opposite. He proposed what we would nowadays call a welfare state. He said try to reduce inequality. Reduce inequality by public meals and other measures appropriate to the city-state. Same problem, opposite solutions. One is reduce inequality and you won't have this problem. The other is reduce democracy. Well, in those conflicting aspirations, you have the foundation of the country. Inequality has many consequences. Not only is it extremely unjust in itself, it has highly negative consequences on society as a whole, even on things like health. There are good studies, Richard Wilkinson and others, showing the more unequal a society is, whether it's poor or rich, the worse the health factors, even among the rich. Because the very fact of inequality has a corrosive, harmful effect on social relations, on consciousness, on human life, and so on, which has all kinds of negative effects. Well, you know these things ought to be overcome. Aristotle was right. The way to overcome the paradox of democracy is by reducing inequality, not reducing democracy. The sins of American society. There was, in the early days of the United States, an endless future of increasing wealth, freedom, achievement, and power, as long as you didn't pay too much attention to the victims. The United States was a settler colonial society, the most brutal form of imperialism. You'd need to overlook the fact that you're getting a richer, freer life by virtue of decimating the indigenous population, the first great original sin of American society. And massive slavery of another segment of the society, the second great sin. We're still living with the effects of both of them.